If you're hearing this right now, pause for a moment. Out of the thousands of things competing for your attention today, you stopped here. That alone raises an interesting question. Why? Every day you scroll past endless information. Videos, posts, headlines, distractions. Most of them disappear from your mind within seconds. But sometimes, something makes you stop. Something catches your attention in a different way. And often, that happens when something inside you is already searching for an answer. Because there is a moment many people experience in life. A strange and quiet moment. A moment when you begin to feel that something bigger might be possible for you. You start thinking about changing your life, starting something new, pursuing a goal that once felt distant. You begin imagining what your future could look like if things actually worked out. And for a brief moment, it feels real. But then something happens. A small voice appears, not loud, not dramatic, just a subtle thought in the background of your mind. What if this doesn't work? Then another thought follows. What if I'm not ready for this? And then another. What if I fail? What if I'm not capable enough? What if this simply isn't meant for me? At first, these thoughts seem harmless, just normal doubts. But if you look closely, you'll notice something fascinating. These thoughts rarely appear when you are doing nothing. They rarely appear when you have already given up. They appear when you start moving forward, when you begin seeing a real possibility of change. And that raises an uncomfortable question. Why does doubt often appear exactly when you are getting closer to something better? To understand this, we need to look at one of the most powerful mechanisms inside the human mind. Because every person carries two very different forces at the same time. One part of you wants growth. It wants expansion. It wants to explore what your life could become. It pushes you toward learning, building, creating, improving. But another part of you has a completely different mission. That part wants safety. It wants certainty. It wants to keep everything exactly as it is. And this second system is extremely powerful. For most of human history, survival depended on avoiding risk. Exploring new territory could mean danger. Trying something unfamiliar could mean death. So the brain evolved to prioritize safety above all else, and it became extremely good at detecting potential threats. The problem is that this same system still operates today, even when the risk is not physical, even when the change you are considering could dramatically improve your life. Whenever you step outside your comfort zone, your brain activates a warning system. But these warnings don't sound like alarms. They appear as thoughts, doubts, fears, insecurities. And here's what makes this mechanism so deceptive. The brain is very good at generating convincing reasons to stop. It will produce logical explanations, practical concerns, realistic worries. But if you look closely, you'll notice something interesting. The intensity of these thoughts often increases the closer you get to real change. Almost like a final attempt to pull you back into familiar territory. There is an old story that illustrates this idea perfectly. A man once spent years searching for diamonds. He dug into the earth every day, convinced that somewhere beneath the ground there was a fortune waiting to be discovered. Days turned into months. Months turned into years. Eventually, exhausted and discouraged, he gave up. He sold the land and walked away. Sometime later, the new owner began digging in the exact same place. Within a short period of time, he discovered one of the largest diamond deposits in the region. just a few inches away from where the first man had stopped. Now, imagine something for a moment. How many people spend their lives walking away just inches before discovering something extraordinary? How many dreams disappear not because they were impossible, but because someone stopped digging too soon? The answer is uncomfortable, probably more than we realize. Because the human mind is not naturally designed for long-term vision. It is designed for short-term safety. It prefers the familiar struggle over the uncertain possibility of success, even when the familiar situation limits your potential. The unknown still feels more dangerous. And this is why moments of transformation often feel uncomfortable. Because growth requires leaving what is known, and the brain interprets the unknown as a potential threat. This is where emotion enters the picture. Many people believe that decisions are primarily logical, but neuroscience tells a different story. Human decisions are deeply influenced by emotional states. Emotion acts like a filter through which reality is interpreted. When fear dominates, opportunities look like risks. When confidence dominates, risks begin to look like opportunities. Two people can face the exact same situation and see completely different possibilities. The external world may be identical, but the internal emotional environment changes everything. And here is the part most people overlook. When someone is close to breaking an old pattern in life, financially, professionally, or personally, emotional resistance often increases. Fear becomes louder, doubt becomes stronger, anxiety becomes more noticeable. Not because the path is wrong, but because the brain is trying to maintain the territory it knows. The subconscious mind values predictability. Even predictable discomfort can feel safer than unpredictable success. This is why moments of transformation often feel uncomfortable, because growth requires leaving what is known, and the brain interprets the unknown as a potential threat. This is where awareness enters the picture. Most people misinterpret this moment. They assume the discomfort is a signal to stop, but sometimes it is the exact opposite. Sometimes it is a signal that something important is happening, that an old pattern is beginning to crack, that a new possibility is trying to emerge. Think about how many times people abandon something meaningful right before progress appears. They quit the project, they abandon the idea, they walk away from the opportunity. Not because success was impossible, but because the psychological resistance became too uncomfortable. So they retreat, back to what feels familiar, back to what feels safe, even if that safe place is exactly where they always felt stuck. But some people eventually notice something different. They begin recognizing the pattern. They notice when the doubts appear. They notice when fear becomes louder. And instead of treating those signals as commands, they start seeing them as indicators. Indicators that growth is happening. Indicators that they are approaching the edge of their current identity. Because every meaningful transformation requires crossing a psychological boundary, the boundary between who you were and who you are capable of becoming. And that boundary rarely feels comfortable. It feels uncertain, unstable, sometimes even frightening. But uncertainty is not always the enemy. Often it is simply the space where new possibilities begin. The people who eventually change their lives are not the ones who never feel fear. They are the ones who learn how to move while fear is present. They understand something subtle but powerful. The mind produces thousands of thoughts every day. Trying to eliminate every negative thought is impossible. The more you fight them, the more attention you give them, and attention is fuel for the mind. Instead, something far more effective happens when you shift your focus, not toward controlling every thought, but toward influencing the emotional environment beneath those thoughts, because emotion is the foundation that shapes perception. Your environment affects it. The people you spend time with affect it. The conversations you have affect it. The information you consume affects it. Even the places you choose to spend your time can shift your emotional state. All of these elements constantly send signals to your nervous system, and those signals influence how your brain interprets reality. Change the emotional environment, and your perception of possibilities begins to change. When perception changes, decisions change. When decisions change, actions change. And when actions change, life begins to change. Not instantly, not magically, but gradually and very real. You begin noticing opportunities that once seemed invisible. You begin interpreting challenges differently. You begin acting with more clarity. And slowly, almost quietly, the direction of your life starts to shift. Not because the world suddenly became easier, but because your relationship with uncertainty became stronger. And when that happens, something remarkable becomes possible. You keep digging, even when doubt appears, even when fear tries to interrupt the process, because you understand something most people never realize. The greatest obstacle in life is rarely the world outside you. It is the invisible resistance inside your own mind. And once you recognize that resistance, it loses much of its power, because you finally see what it really is. Not a prophecy of failure, not a sign that you should stop, but often a sign that you are getting closer to something important, closer than you think, sometimes only a few inches away. And most people never realize how close they truly were.